All right. Hi. Hi, y'all. Uh, we're here in Massachusetts. It's a warm day. This is Shane Brodie. I'm traveling around the country interviewing trans people about political beliefs, what's going on, current events, etc. Sometimes religious beliefs. I'm getting over a cold. I'm not contagious. I do have a little bit of a cough, so every once in a while I might cough. So if that happens, I might turn the camera off. We're fighting the midday sun at the moment. It's encroaching upon us. Um, we're going to try real hard not to shake this table. It's an outdoor table and it's pretty rickety, but you got to do what you got to do. So today I'm here with a guest and she's going to introduce herself.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. My name's Natasha. I'm a transgender woman.
Shaking a little bit.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. We're going to have to be less animated than usual.
Yeah, I'm a transgender woman. I just moved here to Massachusetts from Kentucky about 2 months ago with my family. I'm a pretty boring kind of stay-at-home wife, so I don't get a whole lot done, but I am openly queer.
You're the first person I've talked to that I connected with on Twitter. And I've connected with a few people on there, but I haven't actually met with anybody yet. Most everybody is on the West Coast or in the Midwest. And I'm so glad to meet somebody here on the East Coast. I did take a little bit of a break from my project because I did get ill and I needed to access some health care. But here I am back again. And I contacted you because I noticed there was a thread on Twitter about people moving from different states, feeling unsafe, and moving to places where maybe they would feel safer or had that idea that maybe that they would be safer. How did that start for you?
Oh gosh. So my partner and I have been wanting to move out of Kentucky since before my transition.
Oh, really? Okay.
It didn't become until kind of within, I guess, the last 6 months or so.
May I ask when did you start, by the way?
So I started transitioning almost 2 years ago.
Okay. Oh, wow, 2 years. You're a baby.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Still very, very little.
Yeah.
In the
Tender.
trans community.
Yes.
So yeah, I kind of went through that for like a year, just dealing with it. Finally managed to get on hormones, and then it'll be
In Kentucky?
in Kentucky.
Mhm.
Yes. So I went to an informed consent clinic.
Great.
They set me up with hormones. It was actually super simple, which was surprising. I met with the head of the clinic that they had there. And
Were you a student there? Or?
no, former student, but
Okay, great.
it was just like it was like a medical offshoot, so it
Okay.
wasn't even on the college's campus.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So
Do they have a medical school?
yes, they
Oh,
do.
okay. So that's the offshoot medical school.
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I went in, I spoke with them. They didn't give me, didn't give me any grief. They asked for my story, but they didn't require it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I walked out with a prescription for estradiol and spironolactone at the end of the
Great.
day.
Yeah, it's that sounds wonderful. A lot of people, have a much longer process, but even now, a lot of trans people have to do a lot of convincing of people around them, especially even in medical situations, even if they've, are healthy, and whether that's physically or mentally, and they, have thought about it for a long time. There's still quite a bit of gatekeeping out there. So I'm glad that was easy for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were in Kentucky. What was that like? Being a trans person, was this in a rural area or
So it was in a sort of metro area,
Okay.
if you will.
like suburban?
Suburban, kind of like the area we're in now.
Okay.
It was a college town.
Yeah.
So, but sort of, there's like a little ring, if you will, around that city. That's fairly progressive, and then outside of that, it is very, very rural.
Yeah. Like tobacco farms and
Horse farming.
horse farms.
Horse
Okay.
farming.
Yeah.
Horse farming is huge.
Yeah.
In the area.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I traveled through there once. I was surprised at how green it was.
Yes.
Yeah, it
Very,
is
very
so green there.
Very green.
Yeah.
So, but it's very rural. I don't want to say it's necessarily conservative, but there is a cultural
Yeah.
conservatism
Yeah.
to
There's also
the
quite
people.
a bit of libertarianism there as well.
Yes, there's a
Mhm.
streak that kind of
Yeah.
runs through them.
Yeah. And speaking of that, what would be kind of your political beliefs? Just
Yeah,
very generally.
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily like fit into like an exact box because I feel like I'm constantly learning new things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of that transitioning, you learn so much more about yourself and the world that also changes your beliefs.
Right.
But I would say I'm fairly progressive. I'm a liberal. I think I want to say I've seen some of this before, and I was like, oh, I don't fit into it just because my political beliefs are kind of the mainstream for transgender people. It feels like.
Yeah. So once again, try and
Yes.
be less animated.
Sure.
It's so hard because we're both very animated people. Like we both talk with our hands and our bodies and stuff, and we just can't do that with this. It's kind of strange to have a loose interview and then be really stiff at the same time.
Right.
Anyway, so when you say that you've been changing beliefs, does that mean that you were maybe more conservative growing up, or?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I definitely held, at least until like high school, there was very much a again, the cultural conservatism, if you will.
Yeah.
Less so,
we're
yeah,
not-
like, the economic side because I was a kid.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's hard to know that stuff. I mean,
right.
geez.
But that began changing as I was introduced to queer people.
Oh, okay.
I'm not afraid to say at 14, I was very homophobic.
Mm.
A lot of repression there.
Okay.
So,
So when were you when did you first get information?
gosh, so I was kind of like, I really wasn't introduced to the concept of trans people until like I left my hometown at 18.
Mm.
And
Is that to go to college?
yes,
Mhm.
and that's where I stayed in the college town in Kentucky until I moved here.
Mm.
So being introduced to them, it was sort of a very strange concept. Of course, I was introduced to trans women. Trans men were, at least early on in my process, were very much not discussed.
Yeah, and they're also sometimes a little more elusive.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's something I've come to find out is that like, there's definitely a social stigma to sort of, or there has been, I should say, not necessarily now, that trans men are, I don't want to say required, but there's this sort of belief that they should just kind of blend into the background instead of being a voice.
Well, I don't know about that. It may be different in different parts of the country.
Right.
Like in some parts, there's very, very active trans men. Certainly where I've lived before, like in California, there were a lot of active trans men. But then you go up to Oregon, and most of the very active people, at least when I lived in Oregon, were trans women.
Right.
And it was actually hard for trans men to even be politically active because trans women were really the dominant voice there.
Soaking up the spotlight.
well,
as we do.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. I mean, that happens in all political
Right.
situations. There's always people fighting for their own interests, and those interests sometimes are, within a community that's small. Sometimes there can be factions, and
Right.
everybody's, we're all hurting. We're all trying to do our thing, trying to get recognized. Some of the issues are a little bit different though for trans men and trans women.
So I saw pictures of a transgender woman who had been with her partner for several years, and they renewed their vows. And it was a side-by-side photo of their first wedding and their vow renewal.
Oh, interesting.
And I was just like, if they can do that, and they were in their 30s when they transitioned, and I was in my mid-20s, so I thought, if they can do that, and they can live a happy life, why can't I?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why having role models is so important. That's why some people, not everybody has to be open. I mean, that's not true at all. But it's great when some people can be.
So since I kind of discovered myself late in life, when I guess a lot of Gen Zers were as well.
Your 20s really isn't late in life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I know trans people who
Right.
transitioned in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It feels late to me, I guess.
Yeah. Well, when you have a lot of buildup, you probably, I'm thinking that you probably thought about it for a while before this.
Yeah.
So when you have that rolling around in your head for a long time, it does seem like maybe it's late when you've been thinking about it for a long time. But, we all have our own process for
Right.
this.
Our own journey.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I think, you know, that person sharing their journey at the time, that's sort of, that kickstarted it for me.
Yes. And to see an example, to
Right.
to see
Right.
the happiness there, you know?
Right, of course. And that's kind of like inspired me to be public.
Right. Okay. So you are public.
Right.
You've done some activism.
I mean, I've been able to do what I can
Yeah.
just because of the pandemic.
That's all that anybody can do is what they can.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's like if being openly queer and
Yeah.
sharing my story is what I can do,
Yeah.
I just want to help one other person.
Yeah.
And then my job's done.
Yeah. So you identify currently as a queer trans woman then?
Yes.
Okay. So does that mean that you're lesbian, or is that too strange of a word?
No. I mean,
generational maybe?
no, definitely like lesbian or sapphic,
Oh,
if you will.
Sapphic. Interesting.
It's
sapphic.
it's difficult because I don't like the term lesbian because non-binary people exist.
Oh, okay.
And I've yet to meet a non-binary person who wasn't just insanely hot.
Okay.
So, you know, maybe a cultural lesbian.
Yeah, and you know, it could also be generational too, because some 70s, 80s women were like, yeah, I'm a lesbian, you know.
Right.
But things are a little different now. But I gotta say, I love it that the younger generations are coming up with all this language.
Yeah.
Now, usually older people will complain about that, and I must say I have complained in the past a few times, just because it's kind of wild at first. But I actually really love it. You know, it's like, go for it.
Right.
You know, people used to just dress up all the time in wild clothes, but we really didn't talk about all that much. Now it's much more sophisticated, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think adding a term to it, you know, for some people it might seem like a label sort of brings you in. I can't think of the word. Oh my God, restricts you, if you will. But to me, it feels it's more of like an identifying term, and helping you discover like what works for you.
Yeah.
You know, saying I'm sapphic is just an easy way to sort of cover all my bases.
Sure, and I don't know. It sounds kind of fun too.
It is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like the sapphic community, if you will, is very, very friendly, very fun.
Well, apparently, you know, Sappho had a lot of wild parties out there on the islands.
Yes. Oh, and we have lots of wild parties in Facebook groups.
Awesome. Even though this area might not be as blue, let's say, as the Boston area,
Right.
It seems like even though that's the case, if something were to happen, there's still pretty good laws on the books that protect trans people.
Yes.
So you would have some recourse if something did happen. Whereas in some states, there's blue spots in them. Like Kentucky, there's definitely some blue spots in them. But then the general laws,
correct,
you know, aren't so great. So there's a very, very little protection.
Right.
It seems like.
No, and that was a factor in moving.
Right.
And not just for trans people or trans health. I mean, that goes all the way down the list of, you know, oppressed classes, if you will.
Right.
But yeah, no, like here it's like I am, you know, I have some state protections in place.
Right.
You know, to legally protect me, not just as a woman, which the state sees me as, but as a trans woman as well.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a sense of...
That's a good... I'm glad that you made that distinction, because definitely women's rights in general are just, they're being eroded.
Correct.
Right? And that...
Yeah. Oh, they're being slaughtered.
Yeah, and that includes, you know, trans women, obviously, of course, but women as an entire class. I mean, that's half the country, y'all. What are we doing, you know?
Yeah. So, there's a legal protection here, and that offers a layer of comfort and security that we didn't have before we moved.
Right. So, what, I guess, if this isn't too personal, was there like a breaking point that you were like, I gotta get out of here?
Yes and no. So we've been working on moving for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
It is a long process.
Yeah.
Um, that being said, earlier in 2022, whenever our General Assembly was taking up new laws,
Yeah.
I specifically noticed that they were taking up laws.
Is that like the state legislature?
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, they've got I don't know if they've got a House and a Senate, but it's just, they call it the General Assembly.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, they were adopting laws that were targeting specifically reproductive rights, transgender athletes,
Yes.
things like that, while ignoring much bigger problems.
Right. Right.
I don't want it to sound like it was just for transgender rights
Yeah.
that we moved.
Yeah.
We moved because we thought that Kentucky wasn't right for us or our family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we wanted to raise our child somewhere that was a little more progressive,
Sure.
but also somewhere with really good schools
Yeah.
and fantastic healthcare.
Yeah.
There is a quality of life improvement moving from just Kentucky to here, even though I haven't like gone from like rural to city.
Sure.
I'm still very much from suburbia to suburbia.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And this area is pretty great. Like, it's not super like gentrified or anything.
No.
So it seems like it's kind of affordable for the coast.
For the coast.
Yeah, for the
For
coast.
the coast with a massive asterisk.
Of course. That's why I say that.
Yes.
But I mean, you go to closer to Boston and it's crazy. There's
it's
like
ridiculous.
mansions all over the place.
Yeah.
But here there's mansions, but they're older
Mm-hmm.
and they need a little paint
Yeah.
and they need a little scraping
There's definitely a little bit of a working class feel to it.
yeah, definitely. I love the old buildings here though,
Mhm.
because you'll go down these streets and you'll see these beautiful old buildings with like carvings in the rock and stuff like that, and then there'll be like a vaping store there, and so it's like modern and like
Yes.
several hundred years old, and who knows? There's probably ghosts in that store.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
this whole place is haunted.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. There's I'm sure there's a lot of stories here. I mean,
Yeah.
besides Salem, of course, which is right nearby.
Right next door.
Yeah, right next door. I noticed that there was a permanent Halloween store close by. I was like, I've never seen that.
Only here.
Only here.
Only here can that happen.
Only here. I mean, it's summertime. Here we are sweating in the middle of
Yeah.
the summer. That was interesting. So I've been turning off my equipment just because we're fighting the sun and fighting the heat a little bit. And there was just a loud boom, and I don't know what that was. Hopefully it was just firecrackers, but you never know. So anyway, we're talking a little bit about the charm of this area. What is it like, as a person who decided to move from a state where, did you grow up there?
Yes.
Yeah, where you grew up to another state that is quite different. I mean, it's
Yeah.
on the coast, it's very blue. This is a suburban area, like you were saying, so it's a similar kind of lifestyle, but different place, very different.
Right.
And you're also a very different person.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, it's scary.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I think, transitioning is scary. Moving across the country is scary,
Yeah.
especially a couple thousand miles.
Yeah. Is it really that far? Wow.
It's at least 1,000.
Yeah.
It might be close to 1,500.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and it's not just me. It's
Yeah.
moving a wife and a kid
Right.
and all of our stuff.
Yeah.
So,
your pets.
and our pets.
Yeah.
So it is sort of, it can kind of be shocking at times. For sure.
What exactly is shocking?
There's simple things.
Yeah.
Like the groceries are different.
Okay.
For instance. But then,
Like the grocery brands
right.
and stuff.
But then there's also good things that shock me.
Mm.
Like when people see me and my wife out in public, there's no double take.
Okay.
There's never any we've not been asked inappropriate questions up here about our family.
Would people do that in Kentucky? I mean, I don't mean to get down on Kentucky. I mean,
Right.
I've known some wonderful people from there. It's a beautiful state, but
I think I think there's a cultural difference there.
yeah.
In Kentucky, there is very much a sense of, I don't want to necessarily say family, but it's sharing. It's about sharing your life with other people. Much more up here, where it's very much people don't necessarily care so much.
Oh yes, I think that's Protestantism.
Yeah.
That's a very deep aspect of it. Like you're more quiet, you're more reserved. Family stuff is kept within the family.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not really, at least where I grew up, we were very much, we were open about that sort of stuff with
Yes.
other people
Yeah.
while also sheltering the bad. Always. It was always about presenting the nuclear family, if
Sure.
you will.
Like a
the
happy, the happy
perfect
face.
nuclear family.
Yes,
Right. That was sort of the go-to. So whenever you deviate from that, there is a sense just in everyday life that you might not be welcome. And that's not necessarily like the way people talk to you. That's the way that we were raised.
Yeah.
As, kids in rural Kentucky.
So, moving quite a distance, that can be hard for anyone. What's it like for a trans person? Because, I myself, I'm moving around the country doing this, and I'm finding things a little bit difficult, like accessing healthcare.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky.
Yeah.
My wife has a really good job. They have
Wonderful.
They have a very, very inclusive insurance policy that does cover things like surgeries.
Does she work for like a corporation that has good policies?
Yeah, she works for a makeup brand. I won't say which one,
great.
but she works for a makeup brand that is. I think they're very progressive, personally.
Wonderful.
I mean, they're as progressive as a corporation can
Excellent.
be.
No, I've seen some good work recently from corporations.
They're doing a lot better. I mean, that hasn't been too much of a challenge.
Yeah.
I will say it has been a challenge just in general to see a healthcare provider. And I don't think that's necessarily because I'm trans, because I was able to get into like a transgender health clinic pretty easily.
Okay.
But
is that local or do you have to travel?
It's local.
Okay, great.
So it's it's either in this town or a town next to us.
That's wonderful because this town isn't that big.
No,
so
only
that's
about
great.
50,000 people.
Yeah, because I mean, in other states, sometimes you have to drive across the state or even to another state in order to find healthcare.
Yeah.
Or you have to do it telehealth.
Right.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So, and that also came into deciding where we wanted to live.
Yeah.
We wanted to live somewhere where we were like, I don't want to be hassled.
Yeah. What kind of research did you do?
I mean, gosh, it was a lot of asking friends that I'd met online during the pandemic.
Yeah. Right.
So it was reaching out to people, and then it was like, if they lived in, say, Chicago, hey, tell me about Chicago.
Right.
Tell me what you like about it, what you dislike. And then, of course, we also visited we didn't necessarily visit up here, but we went out onto the Cape. Sure. And we visited some local areas when we came up here. So
Cape Ann, you're talking about?
It was down on Cape Cod.
Okay.
So, we were touristy.
Yeah.
So,
it takes a surprisingly long time to drive out to the tip of the Cape.
Oh my God!
It's like a spiral.
It is.
Woo.
Yeah. It's, if you ever want to go to P-Town, you've either got to drive or take a ferry.
Yeah, it takes all day.
Yeah.
The towns are very cute though along the way. Some of them are a little bit touristy, but not too much, surprisingly.
Yeah. And I mean, and I don't want to say that like everything about our move coming up here was because of gender equality or anything like that. And while it did play a huge aspect, the culture, just the general vibe, if you will, is definitely, I don't want to say it's necessarily more laid back, but it's definitely a situation of, you're in a queer relationship, that's cool.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Whatever,
dude.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, of where you're living here, do you take advantage of that? Like, because you're fairly close to the coast here. Do you go to the beach? Do you go to the Capes?
We work on it.
Yeah. I mean, you've only been here a couple months. So.
It's difficult, and it's also incredibly hot. So that doesn't make it easier.
Yeah.
So, but
you should be used to that though. Kentucky, come on.
It's true. I will say it's a lot less humid up here than in Kentucky.
Okay.
And I don't want to say that was the number one reason we moved, but it was certainly a big factor.
Sure. That and those greasy hush puppies in Kentucky.
Yes. Oh my gosh, we love them.
You love them?
I made hush puppies the other night.
I could not stand them.
I made hush puppies the other night. They're just quintessential, and I'm shaking.
Yeah, it's okay. When I visited Kentucky, every place that we went to, there was just like a pile of hush puppies on the plate, along with the thing you
Yeah.
actually ordered, and I was like, no, thank you. Anyway, yeah, I'm sure the food culture is different here. I mean, have you tried any of the seafood?
Oh gosh,
There's
yes.
like oyster bars out here.
Yeah, I mean, seafood it's huge up here.
Yeah.
And it's strange because there's some cultural food differences.
Mhm.
You know, like there's no barbecue restaurants.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
there might be one
Or
or
they're
two.
not that great.
Right, or they're not that good.
People just don't know. Y'all don't know.
Right.
Go to North Carolina. Oh, have you been to North Carolina?
Yes.
Oh, the barbecue there
It's
is
delicious.
just amazing.
It's fantastic.
Oh,
Yeah.
and it's everywhere too.
Yeah, the Bible Belt, you could also call it the barbecue belt.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
anything south of that, that's just, they know how to cook.
I agree. Yeah, so there's a lot of oyster bars here.
Yeah.
I actually went to one once. I went to Harvard, but before I went there, somebody I had met online was like, I'm going to take you out for, the East Coast lobster rolls and, different, and it's not just oysters. It's like different kinds of them. They're like
Yes.
seasonal. There's like little ones and big
Yes.
ones. And then we went out for like this giant, like baby's head size ice cream cone with little sprinkles all, like it was literally just covered.
That
in
sounds
sprinkles.
about right.
Yeah. So she gave me the East Coast, foodie experience there, which I could never afford, but
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
yeah, but it's great though.
It's delicious.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, so you did some research and you talked to some people online.
Mm-hmm.
How about finding community around here?
Yeah, I mean that kind of came from just being a part of the online trans community.
Okay.
One of the
So you found people online.
correct.
And have you met them
Yes.
in person?
Yeah,
Okay,
I met a
great.
couple of them in person since moving here.
Wow. That's quick. After 2 months?
Yeah,
That's
like
great.
like I moved at the beginning of June, and then a friend invited me to Pride at the end of
Okay.
June,
All right.
and it was my first in-person Pride, so it was like
Oh, wow.
it was awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, but yeah, I started meeting people actually through a cross-dressing Discord
Okay.
online, and that kind of evolved from there. So like a lot of friends that I made on that cross-dressing Discord just so happened to be trans fin as well.
This is a little bit of a controversial topic, but what do you think is the relationship between the cross-dressing community and the trans community?
Oh my gosh. I don't want it to seem like it's like a stepping stone.
Yeah.
I don't want
Right.
anyone to think that because I
Right.
know there are plenty of cross-dressers who just do it for fun.
Right.
Um,
And they're very straight and cis-identified, actually.
right, and
Yeah.
I thought that's how I was at 1st.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, I just like wearing women's clothes.
Yeah.
But it was sort of being involved in that.
Yeah. Right.
And like I still try to stay close to my roots, if you will. Like
I know they're very social.
They
have
are.
a lot of events.
They do, and it's like it's strange because there is like I don't want to say there's a turnover in the cross-dressing community, but there kind of is, and I'm kind of an example of that. Just
Yeah.
because after a while you're not a cross-dresser anymore. It's every day.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
like dressing
So-
up is every day.
In some ways, if you are a trans person, it's a great way to try things out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's a fantastic way to try things out without judgment.
Right. Right.
One of the things that whenever I was initially sort of studying trans people, if you will, in my own amateurish way,
Right, because you were college years.
right? It was
Yeah.
like I was like, oh, well, like a lot of like trans women who come out in adulthood, if you will. I don't want to say later in life, but in adulthood,
You mean like 30s, 40s kind of thing?
or any time after
Yeah,
18, if you will.
Sure.
They typically will they will present female online
Mm.
and do that first. And I did that, and it was a fantastic experience.
Yeah. I'm so glad to hear you say that you found very little animosity between cross-dressing and trans, because I've actually heard some animosity
There is
out
some.
there.
Yeah.
Have you come across that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
can you talk about that? a
Yeah,
little bit?
sure. Like, I mean, I have met people who were part of the same cross-dressing Discord that I was, and part of that same community who
And that's an online
Yeah.
social media
correct.
platform.
Right. So for me at least, a lot of my queer discovery came from places like Reddit.
Okay.
And then that kind of took me to places like
Reddit
Discord.
is very public, though.
Correct.
Whereas Discord seems it's more private.
Discord's private chat rooms,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
will.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much more intimate, and not in like a sexual way, but on
No,
like a
no.
person-to-person
Yeah.
way, if you
And
will.
people do a lot of political organizing on there.
Mhm.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's some people who, I don't know how they'll come out, and they've come out as trans feminine, and then they transition before me, but they've kind of almost subscribed to this reverse gender binary where they're trying, and for them it's very much trying to, I feel like, eliminate non-binary people, eliminate cross-dressing people. It's like saying you can be trans, but you have to be either man or a woman.
Okay, so a very sort of almost strangely essentialist
or
version.
absolutist.
Yeah, absolutist
yeah.
or very binary.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say that the community used to be very much more like that.
Right.
Luckily, it isn't. There are unfortunately, through this project, I have met some trans people who have animosity for other trans people because they feel like they know what being trans is about.
Right.
And it's their version of being trans. Everybody else is sort of not authentic or something like that. And I think it's wrong for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not kind.
No.
And it's not friendly.
No, I mean,
You know?
it's a load of bunk. You
Yeah,
know?
it
I mean,
is.
if we're gonna,
Thank you.
the
There
whole
you go.
the whole point of being transgender is to acknowledge that the gender binary is not biological.
Yeah.
Or it's not instinctive, that you can be whatever you want to
Yeah,
be.
and biology is not destiny.
Right. And
Simone de Beauvoir. There
and
you go.
to say to anyone like, you can be a girl, but you can't be whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
That goes against the whole movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, who cares too? People get to do what they want, you know,
Mhm.
as long as you're not hurting somebody else.
Yeah.
That's why I love Halloween, by the way. That's one of the cultural institutions, and also sometimes plays, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Hasty Pudding is an example of that, of men dressing up, you know, men doing drag. You know, these are not new things, and there's always been outlets in our cultures, multiple cultures all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
for trans people or gender non-conforming behavior or cross-dressing, all that stuff. I don't know. I just think it's harsh to be
It is.
hard, you know, to do that to other trans
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Oh, it's just, I don't know. It's like, who are you to
Yeah.
gatekeep
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah. I think for some of them, they feel like there was so much gatekeeping and so much that they had to go through
There is definitely, I think, some
That-
repression there.
that somehow other people need to struggle. I actually heard that online from an infamous trans man who's out there. I'm not a fan of his, and I worry that people listen to him, that you know, he spouts this kind of thing all the time, and yeah, I don't like that people listen to him. But yeah, there's more than one way to be trans. He actually said that he likes it that trans people have to struggle,
Yeah, that's
because he had to struggle. You know, I mean, why
Yeah.
torture other people? Let's make things easier.
and I don't get that way of thinking personally.
No.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it just seems a little outdated.
Yeah, very outdated. And you don't have to be old to be outdated too. There's younger
Yes.
people who are definitely outdated in their
Yes.
ideas as well. Have you come across that as a what do you say, Gen Z?
So I'm kind of like at the end of the millennials.
Okay, end of
So,
millennials.
but I
okay.
kind of, but like it kind of has overlap with Gen
Okay.
Z. Just
Anyone
because.
who's younger than me, I just keep calling Gen Z. But anyway, I'm Gen X. Anyway,
So yeah, so like I mean, I don't have that many interactions with just people day to day.
Yeah.
I kind of keep to myself, and
Okay.
especially around here when people interact with me, I'm a tall woman.
Yeah.
And that's the weird
Amazon.
thing. Right.
There you go.
If you will.
Why not?
But online, it's very much a situation of if they see a pride flag, they immediately start attacking.
Okay.
And it's not even
Pronouns in the bio,
right.
as they say.
Right. And
Oh.
like yeah, and like I've even taken like pronouns out of the bio and it messes with them. That's how far we've gone, that they like expect it.
Oh wow.
So
Why didn't you warn me?
like oh, no pronouns anyway. But there's also, and it's also funny because I've also faced the stigma of being a woman.
Yeah, of course.
Just the last couple of days, I've had like,
my experience is so different than yours, I'm sure,
Right.
on a daily basis, you know.
yeah, but it's like the last couple of days, there's been 2 or 3 people that called me fat, and I'm just like, I'm not fat.
No.
Why do you think I'm fat? Because
You're-
I'm a woman?
You're larger than average.
Right. Like
Yeah.
I'm really tall,
Yeah.
but I'm not overweight.
Yeah. I mean, and who cares if you were anyway?
Right.
I mean,
Like,
it's none of your damn business.
If I'm overweight, my doctor would like to talk to you
Yeah.
because they disagree.
Yeah, it's also none of your damn business. But yeah, that's a cultural thing that we have, that men and sometimes even women, you know, in a competitive way, will comment on women's bodies all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it happens to men too. I've certainly had it, but it's also when I was a woman and I had breasts and all that. I mean, daily harassment.
Oh yeah.
Daily harassment out in the world. Now it's, you know, every once in a while, if I piss a guy off, he's like, "Oh, you're so short." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I'm bald too, and I'm fat. I don't care."
Right. Like I don't care what you say.
Yeah, really don't care. Anyway,
So, yeah, no, there's definitely men and women, regardless of transgender,
Yeah.
are treated differently.
Oh, yeah.
And I think,
that's such an interesting thing,
and
isn't it?
that's something that, you know, only people like you and I who do it, you know, again, not later in life, but as adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're the only people that can really experience that.
Right. I know offline we were talking a little bit about this, but is there any sort of difference between Kentucky and Massachusetts for that sort of thing? You know, just being a woman out in the world. Not even trans, but just a woman.
Just as a woman?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think so.
No.
I mean, my interactions have been very limited. I
Yeah.
feel like I would need like 10 years of Massachusetts
Yeah.
and compare it to 10 years
Sure.
of Kentucky.
Sure.
But I mean, as far as like the way people treat me, it's still very much like the same.
Sure.
You know.
Sure. And what do you miss about Kentucky? Because I'm sure there are things you miss
There are
besides
things.
barbecue.
Barbecue is probably the biggest, and having a backyard. But we're working on that one.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's a bit tighter here.
So, I mean, other than that, I mean, the cost of living is a lot lower.
Mm,
But
yeah.
the biggest difference is traffic.
Oh. Yeah.
Kentucky is very much a, you know, they motion you on to go. It's very much a take your own time.
Okay.
Like, oh, the light turned yellow, I'm going to slow down.
Sure.
Up here, if the light turns yellow, the 5 cars closest to the light all speed up.
Yeah.
It's a
And they might even honk
Yeah,
if you don't
it's-
go on that second.
it's a very aggressive driving.
Yeah. But I find here, though, that people are really good drivers.
They have to be.
They have to be,
You
because
have to be.
the streets are all wonky. They're all going like this.
Oh,
and,
my God.
And they're like this too. And it's just tight because it's all like, you know, horse trails and
Right,
stuff that
yeah.
they made into.
They just paved them.
Yeah, they just paved over them, and they're
So-
so wonky. But also, never go to Texas or Atlanta. Like the cities in Texas and Atlanta. Oh, the drivers there.
Oh.
It's like 10 times worse than here. Trust me.
I can imagine.
Trust me. Yeah, people are relatively friendly here. Trust
Right.
me. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'll take that then.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a thing. Also too, I find when I'm in southern states, there's kind of this daily friendliness in a southern place that I really don't get in more, you know, blue states or coastal, you know, the northeast here.
Right. You're sort of your southern hospitality,
Yeah,
if you will.
like people calling each other honey, and you know, it's not like a sexist thing. It's just
Right.
like friendly.
Yeah, and that's definitely... Kentucky's weird because it's kind of a hodgepodge of several different cultures.
Yeah, tell me about that.
So like in the western and southern part of the state,
Mm-hmm.
it's very much sort of a rural, you know, sort of traditional Bible Belt southern. There's a church on every corner,
Yeah.
if you will.
Right.
Central part of the states.
Whenever the crossroads meet.
Right.
Yeah.
Central part of the state's a little more well off. It's that's where all your horse farms are. That's where your big universities, state capital, all of that's there. It's kind of got its own flavor of a regional mix.
Yeah.
Eastern Kentucky is very Appalachian,
Mm.
very poor
Very
as
poor.
well.
Oh, yeah.
They recently were hit by some just absolutely devastating floods.
Mm.
One of the poorest regions in the country.
Really?
Yeah, and they've been forgotten. Frankly,
Oh,
that's
wow.
that's my tangent.
Wow.
And then the northern half of the state's actually a bit Midwestern,
Yeah.
kind
Now,
of along the Ohio River.
now, somebody like me who's spent most of my time on the West Coast, it tends to be very segregated in terms of wealth and also racially.
Yes.
Yeah, people don't realize that, but the West Coast is very segregated racially. Did you find that in Kentucky? It's also very racially segregated out here. It's just a little politer, you know.
Yeah.
But did you find that in Kentucky?
So in Kentucky, it's not as big a problem because there's just no minority community
Yeah.
to really section themselves off.
Oh, really? So
So-
it's mostly white people?
It's like 94-95% white people.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
And I
'Cause
might
there's-
be off on that,
There's
but
some
it's very
places.
high.
There's some places like in Tennessee and moving toward like Georgia, which is like
Right.
black towns. Like,
Yes.
all black towns.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's weird because Kentucky never had. I'm a history nerd, but Kentucky didn't really get much of the Great Migration.
Okay.
They didn't really have a lot of holdouts from the sharecropping era
Okay.
in the Black
So
Belt.
people just pass through,
pretty much.
pretty much.
Like
Okay.
a lot of people who live in Kentucky will say that their heritage is American.
Okay.
That's because they don't know.
Yeah. Right.
Their ancestors settled there in the 17 to 1800s, and their past beyond that's been lost to history.
Right.
So
I'm sure there's some interesting family trees in there, though.
Yep.
Yep.
Very much so.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, there's definitely like there's a black community,
Yeah.
there's a Hispanic community. You'll see it especially in religion.
Yeah, that's Sunday's the most segregated day of
Yes.
the week.
And that holds true even
Yep.
in Kentucky.
Are you religious, by the way?
No.
No. Okay.
Used to be. Pre-transition, I was.
Oh, interesting.
So,
what was your background?
I was raised as a Christian. My parents were
Just
Southern Baptist.
non-denominational?
Well, my parents were Southern Baptist. I sort of subscribed to the non-denominational
Okay.
belief
Sure.
as I got older. But after transitioning, after coming out to my parents, I kind of like that self-awareness of learning that you're trans doesn't stop with gender identity. It affects everything.
Yeah.
So
Have you thought about going to welcoming or affirming Christian churches?
I've considered it.
Yeah.
I've definitely considered it.
Because there is a social aspect to that.
Correct.
That some people miss.
Right. There is definitely a social aspect to it all, and I understand that.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
Yeah.
Honestly, for me, there is still a bit of religious trauma
Okay.
to address.
I understand.
I was a pastor's kid, so from
Sorry to hear that.
from 10 months old to the day I turned 18, I was on a pew basically every
Okay.
Sunday.
Yeah. Well, you
So-
had to be.
Right. No
Yep.
choice.
Nope. No choice.
So it's been about 10 years since then that it's taken me to like realize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to realize it, not even to fully
Sure.
understand it.
Well, a lot of that stuff it will unravel for the rest of your life. Trust me.
Correct.
I mean, I'm in my 50s and I'm still thinking about some of the things that happened when I was a kid. And I grew up Christian Science, which is very different. It's more like a sect. It's less of a mainline denomination.
Right.
And there's some of the programming from that, and I call it programming because it is a little cult-like. I feel like.
Yes.
I've learned to appreciate it, actually, some of the better aspects as I've gotten older. Like, there was a reason why in the 1800s people did not go to doctors. Because if you went to the
Right.
doctor, you were likely to die.
Yeah.
Because medicine was sucked. I mean, they were giving people arsenic and all this crazy stuff,
Yeah.
bleeding them. I mean, it was medieval. It was still medieval.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm still working some of that out. So it may be, that you do that as well. I mean,
Right.
It's deep stuff.
It is, and it's one of those things that you kind of like. For me personally, it's like I'm sick of dealing with it.
Yeah,
So
okay.
you gotta bite it down. You gotta go to therapy, and you gotta work it out.
That's right. And, for some reason, for some people, the cutoff there is good. It's healthy. It's so
Right.
healthy. For me, I did a cutoff as well. Then the coolest people I ever met who were welcoming of queer people when I was a teenager, and the healthiest people I ever met were Quakers. And that sort of slightly welcomed me back into
Mm-hmm.
thinking about religion in general,
Right.
and kind of going back on that journey. I would say that I'm a religious person. I'm eclectic,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I
Okay.
appreciate a lot of different beliefs,
Right.
not specific.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I understand that.
yeah,
For sure.
yeah.
I think part of my transition journey, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
was also taking the time to look at other religions.
Yeah.
To look at Buddhism, Hinduism.
Mm.
Um,
Did you find those interesting?
from a historical context, yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Or philosophy, maybe?
from a philosophy standpoint, there were definitely like, I remember specifically like with Buddhism, like one of the things they talked about, and it varies from Buddhist to Buddhist, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, of course.
And maybe
It's as vast as Christianity is.
right, and maybe it's because I liked it the best out of all the major religions that I remember it. But it specifically, it was like the doctrine was life is suffering,
Yeah.
and I was just kind of like,
But then you can get over it. And here's the path to that.
right, and it's
to that.
and it's like kind of
Yeah.
like, yeah, like, well, I did suffer, but
Mhm.
but now I'm working to not suffer,
That's right.
and like I don't want to. My purpose in living is not to suffer.
Yeah.
I don't want to think that.
Well, that was the whole point of what Buddha, the historic Buddha did, is that
Mhm.
he realized that there was, tremendous suffering in life, but that his the path that he found was the way out of it.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, Buddhism is interesting.
Mhm.
Meditation is a wonderful practice, even if it's non-religious.
Right.
There's all kinds of things you can do though. Like I love to cook.
Mhm.
Do
Yeah.
do you have like hobbies like that?
Yeah, I mean, like, even before I transitioned,
Yeah.
cooking was just very much it was more, I don't want to say it was necessarily a hobby, but it was more than I don't want to say it was a passion, but it was more than a hobby.
Okay.
Let me put it that way. Like, I did barbecue.
Oh yeah.
Loved
There
making,
we go. Barbecue.
I had a big 100-pound smoker in my backyard before we moved here.
I have an idea for you.
What's that?
Go around here in New England and rate all the barbecue and compare it to Southern.
So, you
might
say
get
that.
you might get some hate mail for that, but
You say that, but we had barbecue, and after I finished eating it,
Yeah.
I went to my wife and I was like, okay, so the cornbread was okay, and I just
Yeah.
listed everything, and she
see,
just looked at me.
she's already doing it.
She just looked at me. She was like, can you enjoy anything?
Yeah. Well, that could be an app because some of us are desperate to find decent
Good
food
barbecue.
decent
yeah.
food up here beyond just oysters and big ice cream cones.
Right. So, yeah. I kind of lost where we were.
I have no idea. I'm getting too hot though. I think that that's a good place to probably
Sure.
stop.
Yeah.
Is there any like last thing that you would like to tell like early in transition trans women or maybe people who are considering moving to a bluer state?
Yeah.
or-
I mean, the biggest thing is if you are considering moving, if you're going to be a transgender or queer refugee, if you will.
Yeah,
Because,
that is happening.
Because that's basically what this is.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
is happening.
It's part of it. But if you are moving, save your money.
Yeah.
That is by far your biggest thing.
Yeah.
Pick somewhere where you can afford to live.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are plenty of affordable places that are going to accept you.
Yeah.
You don't have to live on the coast like
Yeah, right.
me. And plan. Oh my God. The more you plan, the better off you'll be in any
Yeah.
move.
Yeah. So with planning comes patience too.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
patience.
very much so.
So even though our politics are rapidly changing right now, maybe think about that. Cultivate some patience.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what is actually happening in your life right now, and maybe quell some of that panic if you're having panic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as part of that preparation, your legal documents.
Yeah.
Because
legal documents.
different states have different legal rules.
Right.
In Kentucky, if I wanted to change my gender marker, I needed a letter from a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I literally checked off a box.
Okay.
There was no hassle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So ask around, ask
Yeah.
other people, check the laws,
Yeah.
figure out what works best for you.
Yeah, it's really good to ask other trans people because things are always changing, for one thing. And then they can give you, they can show you the links online. They can tell you what court to go to if you need to go into court. They can tell you the decent doctors. Even a place like this, you have to search around for that sort of thing sometimes.
No,
Yeah.
your best asset is the trans
Yep.
community.
Yep. It's
Every
other trans
time.
people. Yep.
Every single time.
Every single time. Yep. Yep. All right. I think that's a good ending there. thank you so much for meeting me.
Yeah,
This
of
is
course.
kind of a last minute kind of, you know, thing. And, I'm pretty irritating online, especially on Twitter. I mean to be a little bit irritating. Uh, I try not to cultivate that in my personal life, though. And I don't know if you noticed some of the heckling I've been doing of politicians and that sort of thing. But I so appreciate you meeting with me.
Of course.
It's always a little bit of a risk to doing
Yes.
things, this
Oh, of
sort
course.
of thing.
Yeah.
And I just, I appreciate
Yeah,
you meeting
no,
with me.
you're fine.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm happy to be here, happy to share my story.
Yeah, yeah. And whatever activism you're doing, you mentioned that you've been doing some activism.
Yeah.
I hope you find some outlets here. To keep going.
I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful to sort of not necessarily. I don't want to necessarily build a following or anything. I
Sure.
just want to.
No, you never
Just-
want. Trust me. Followings are. It's like you're running a daycare center.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
But-
really is like that.
But for me, it's very much about just being. I want to be the role model that I never had. growing up.
Yeah. I can see it. I
Yeah.
can totally see it.
That's every day that I wake up. That's what drives me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And you're in a good place in life. You have a wonderful partner who has a decent job. You have a great place that you're living.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're somebody who can give back, and it's maybe a little bit easier than some other
Correct.
people.
Yeah. And I
yeah.
think, and that doesn't just stop at me.
Yeah.
I think, I heard somebody recently say they thought about going stealth. And I specifically told him, I said, you can be stealth in everyday life, but never give up your ties to the community. That's
Yeah.
that's something I just can't see myself ever doing.
Yeah, some people do that. I'm not sure why. I would like to talk to somebody like that, actually. So if you're a trans person who's not only just post-trans, because there are lots of people like perhaps my age or my experience with being trans, because I transitioned over 20 years ago, who are post-trans, like they don't really consider themselves trans,
Correct.
but they still maintain ties with the trans community. But I would really love to speak to somebody, totally anonymously out there, who just doesn't associate anymore. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
And not only just like from a negative place. It's not meant to be negative, and I'm not trying to do some weird, digging in or something. But like, I just want to hear what life is about for you.
Oh yeah. No, I would be curious too,
Yeah.
just because their story's not being told.
Yeah, exactly.
In part, maybe they don't want it to be,
Yeah.
but whoever can crack the story first,
Yeah.
you got yourself a golden
And
ticket.
That's what I'm trying to do, and I definitely don't have any golden ticket. I'm doing gig work to get by, and I have less than $100 in the bank right at
Oh,
this
geez.
moment. Yeah, it's fine though. My dog and I have food, and there's gas in my tank, But yeah. So no golden ticket. So
Thank you so
such
much
a
for
pleasure.
reaching out to me.
Such a pleasure to
Yeah,
meet
of
you.
course.
All right. See you next time, y'all.